Boy, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into something, well, incredibly personal yet really profoundly universal, the architecture of authentic self-worth. And our source material for this deep dive, it's truly unique. It's not just one book, or a single study. It's more like a collection of wisdom, seemingly disparate quotes, some really profound reflections, all pulled from this document that's just labeled July 3rd. Think of it like a carefully curated set of insights. Our mission today is to find the threads, the profound connections within these passages, because when you weave them together, they don't just offer interesting ideas, they actually reveal an incredible blueprint, a practical, actionable framework for understanding our own psychology and, crucially, for developing self-worth that's actually authentic. That lasts. And here's the core revelation we'll explore, and it might actually surprise you a bit. True self-worth isn't really found by looking inward constantly, picking at our flaws or dissecting insecurities. Often it seems the opposite is true. It's about grounding ourselves in something, well, bigger than just us. And then, maybe counterintuitively, directing our attention outward. This deep dive is designed to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this really powerful shift.
What's truly fascinating here is precisely that mosaic approach you mentioned. This isn't some prepackaged theory from a textbook. It's a synthesis, a really profound one. And this deep dive, well, it's going to illuminate how things like spiritual reflection, sharp psychological insights, and just very practical, actionable wisdom, how they all converge. They form this remarkably comprehensive framework. And it's a framework that promises a tangible path forward, moving us beyond that constant churn of insecurity and self-doubt that, let's face it, so many of us feel. It guides us towards genuine confidence, a clearer sense of purpose, and just a more engaged, more fulfilling way of living. We're not just talking temporary fixes here. We're talking about building a robust, resilient psychological foundation from the ground up.
Okay, so let's start with what feels like the bedrock then. The foundational layer of this whole blueprint for self-worth. Yeah. One of the first really profound insights from our July 3rd document. It comes from Tony Dungy reflecting on Psalm 139. And he makes this really sharp initial observation. He says, so much of what we do as human beings, so many of the mistakes we make and desires we have flows from having very little self-esteem. Wow, that just immediately grabs you, doesn't it? It suggests that a huge number of our daily struggles, our internal battles, even our outward behaviors are maybe just symptoms of this deeper, often unaddressed issue. So what does this insecurity actually look like day to day? How does it, manifest in ways we might not even realize?
That's a truly critical diagnostic point, yeah. And it resonates so deeply with just, human experience.
Yeah.
When our self-esteem is low, or when that fundamental sense of self feels insecure, the source material details specific, often self-sabotaging, behaviors that become almost second nature. I mean, think about it. How often do we, or people we know, find ourselves constantly wearing masks, always trying to be someone we're not, putting on these personas just to get acceptance or approval, or maybe just to avoid being judged? This isn't about healthy adaptation. It's more like a desperate attempt to fit in, to hide what we think is our true, flawed self.
Right. It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Exactly. And this insecurity also pushes us to strive for unworthy goals. These aren't goals that bring real intrinsic fulfillment. They're external validations we end up chasing. Maybe it's a certain amount of money, a specific job title, or, a particular kind of relationship. We chase them because we think achieving them will finally make us feel worthy. But the satisfaction, it's always fleeting, isn't it? Because it's built on this shaky external foundation, not internal value. It can also lead us into bad relationships. Our own neediness, maybe, or just a lack of clear boundaries makes us vulnerable to manipulation, or just unable to build healthy reciprocal connections. We might settle for less, tolerate unhealthy stuff, because deep down we don't believe we deserve better.
That makes sense. And it also mentions compromising integrity, or just blending in.
Yeah, and perhaps most insidiously, that deep-seated insecurity can push us to compromise our integrity, or just blend in with the crowd. We might avoid standing out, keep our true opinions quiet, shy away from tough choices, all just to avoid conflict or potential disapproval. These aren't active, confident choices rooted in purpose. They are, as the source puts it so well, reactive rather than proactive, defensive rather than confident strategies. They're these desperate attempts to manage an internal wound, this deep feeling of being wounded and needy, always looking for some kind of external bandage.
That paints such a vivid picture of the fallout from that internal wound. And the remedy Dungy offers, it isn't about standard self-help techniques or quick fixes, is it? It feels much more fundamental. deeper. He says the core remedy is remembering and truly internalizing this profound truth. You were created by God. Before you were ever born, he knew who you would be. He even emphasizes, you've probably heard that before, maybe so often, that it has lost its meaning. So take a minute to let it sink in. You were created by God.
Wow.
That phrase, let it sink in, that really stands out. It highlights the huge difference between just knowing something intellectually, like a fact you can recite, and actually believing it at a deep heart level, letting it really permeate your whole being. So how does that sinking in actually transform us?
That distinction between intellectual knowledge and what the source calls heart-level belief, yeah, that is absolutely crucial. It's like the difference between knowing the theory of swimming and actually being able to stay afloat in the water. Right. Intellectually acknowledging you were created is one thing. But the profound life-altering impact comes when that truth really penetrates at your core. When it becomes this unshakable inner conviction. That deep belief is what truly fills the mind with a healthy sense of self-worth.
It's not just some generic affirmation, or universal positive thought that applies to everyone. The text really stresses the unique design inherent in each individual. You were designed with a unique combination of abilities, interests, and passions that has never been before and will never be seen in anyone again.
Wow. Unique combination. Never before, never again. Exactly. This specific detail underscores what we can call the irreplaceable nature of individual human existence. You're not a mass-produced item on some assembly line, easily swapped out or replicated. You are singular, custom created, with a purpose woven right into your being. And when this truth deeply resonates, it starts to resolve that wounded and needy feeling Dungy mentioned earlier. It fills the void that often drives us to seek validation in unhealthy ways, because the source of your worth is now internal, foundational, not external and conditional.
So when that truth really lands, when it sinks in at that heart level, it's not just about feeling good about yourself. It has really practical, tangible implications, right? The source says it enables you to know your purpose in life and to fulfill it. It's almost like it gives you a built-in compass for life, guiding you away from those masks and unworthy goals.
Precisely. The psychological power is immense. When this truth really becomes a part of who you are at your core, it generates what we could describe as a secure attachment to existence itself. I mean, imagine trying to build a huge skyscraper on quicksand. It's impossible, right? But this deep truth about your created design provides the bedrock, the unshakable foundation that lets you build a life of purpose without that constant fear of collapse. It's the antidote to the striving, the mask-wearing, the desperate search for external validation we talked about. It shifts your whole internal state from one of deficit, that constant feeling of not enough, to one of inherent value and really profound belonging.
That's huge. A secure attachment to existence itself.
It is. And the source goes further, highlighting that this unique design was intended to last and is for eternal impact. That implies this profound, enduring significance to your life that goes way beyond just transient achievements. It suggests that God guards over your purpose and destiny, is aware of all your needs, even cares for you while you sleep. It draws that powerful analogy to how he cares for the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. Now, that perspective cultivates a really deep sense of being cherished, truly seen, cared for, which directly counteracts those pervasive feelings of insignificance or worthlessness. This foundational understanding becomes the absolute primary pillar in our architecture of authentic self-worth. It provides that unshakable core.
And the uncommon key that Dungy includes, that really hammers this home, doesn't it? It says, God knew you ahead of time and chose to make you. Keep reminding yourself of that truth because it will impact every other area of your life. It's not presented as a one-time realization, not just a fact to check off a list. It's framed as a continuous daily practice. Grounding yourself in that fundamental truth, it sounds like an anchor thought, one that actively stops you from drifting back into those old insecure patterns.
It absolutely serves as that continuous anchor. Yeah, a daily recalibration. The implication here is clear. This isn't just passively accepting some theological point. It's an active daily recognition and integration into your consciousness. This truth doesn't just inform your spiritual life. It fundamentally reshapes your entire psychological landscape. It impacts every other area of your life because it redefines your intrinsic worth. It shifts the focus from that exhausting, never-ending pursuit of external validation to the peaceful acceptance of internal inherent value. This foundational belief allows for a truly proactive approach to life, rooted in a deep, quiet confidence rather than that reactive, defensive posture born of insecurity. When you genuinely believe you are an intentional part of his plan and family, it powerfully resolves that deep, wounded, and needy feeling Dungy pointed to. It transforms it into a secure sense of belonging and purpose.
It's the very first and arguably the most crucial brick in building this architecture.
Okay, so we've established this incredibly powerful foundation, this bedrock of inherent self-worth. But here's where this deep dive takes a fascinating, almost counterintuitive turn. Our July 3rd document brings in Robert Greene's insights, specifically from his work on, well, seduction. Now, you might be thinking, seduction, how on earth does that tie into authentic self-worth? But Greene makes an observation that's incredibly relevant here. He says, and I quote, "Seducers are never self-absorbed. Their gaze is directed outward, not inward." Now, at first glance, that feels totally opposite to so much of what we hear, in the self-help world. It often tells us, look inward, fix yourself, analyze your feelings. What's the psychological mechanism going on here?
It's a brilliant observation, actually. And this is indeed where the paradoxical nature of authentic self-worth really starts to emerge. It adds a crucial behavioral component to our architecture. Greene's insight isn't really about the ethics of seduction itself, but about a profound and universal psychological principle that goes way beyond that specific context. He states very clearly why self-absorption is a sign of insecurity. It is anti-seductive. And this connects directly to a whole wealth of modern research on social anxiety, performance anxiety. When we're constantly preoccupied with ourselves, how we look, our perceived flaws, how we're coming across, are we saying the right thing, we get trapped in this debilitating feedback loop of insecurity. Our mental energy just gets consumed by internal monitoring and self-criticism. This inward focus actually amplifies our anxieties. It makes us less present, less engaging, and ironically, less appealing and less effective in connecting with anyone. Our self-doubt becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy because we're so caught up in ourselves, we just can't genuinely connect.
So the very act of trying to fix ourselves, of trying to appear confident by hyper-focusing on our internal state, actually makes us more insecure and less able to connect. That's quite a twist. It's like trying to cool down by sweating more intensely.
Precisely. It's a really common and insidious trap. The more you obsess over your own anxieties, the more they grow. They consume your mental bandwidth. They isolate you. The alternative Greene proposes, and what this deep dive emphasizes, is truly transformative. It's about getting into someone's skin, imagining what it is like to be them. Now, this isn't just some clever trick or superficial manipulation. It's a sophisticated psychological strategy that fundamentally reorients your attention. This outward focus serves multiple vital functions, forming a really critical behavioral pillar in our self-worth architecture.
Okay, multiple functions, like what?
Well, first and immediately, it powerfully interrupts self-focused anxiety. When your mind is genuinely engaged in trying to understand another person's perspective, there's simply less mental space left for internal rumination and self-criticism. It breaks that destructive loop of internal worry by forcing your attention elsewhere. Simple, but powerful. Second, it profoundly develops empathy and social intelligence. By genuinely trying to understand another person's needs, their motivations, their unique worldview, you become more attuned, more discerning, more skillful in navigating social interactions. This builds critical interpersonal skills that are just invaluable in all aspects of life. And third, perhaps most importantly, this outward focus creates genuine connection. When you truly see and understand another person, they feel seen, they feel valued, understood. That shared human connection, that sense of belonging and reciprocity is one of the most powerful antidotes we have to insecurity. Our innate human need for belonging gets met, not by demanding it from others, but actually by generously offering our attention and understanding to them.
That's truly fascinating. It completely flips the script on how we often think about building confidence, doesn't it? Instead of trying to get something from others, like approval or validation to feel good about ourselves, we're actually giving something by truly seeing and understanding them. And in that very act of giving, our own confidence just organically starts to grow. This is what you meant by the paradox of healthy self-worth, isn't it?
It is indeed. That's the core paradox underpinning this entire framework. The more directly we pursue self-esteem through inward focus, the more elusive it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like trying to grasp smoke. The harder you try to pin it down, analyze it, make yourself feel better through self-absorption, the faster it just dissipates. It's an endless, frustrating chase. But when we shift our approach, when we ground our identity in something larger than ourselves, maybe in that foundational truth Tony Dungy talked about, or through commitment to a larger purpose, and then actively direct our attention toward understanding and serving others, authentic confidence develops almost as a natural byproduct. It's not something you chase as an outcome. It's something that just accrues, an emergent property of living a purpose-driven, other-focused life.
A byproduct, not the goal itself.
Exactly. And this concept is so central that Greene actually calls it a daily law. When you meet someone, your first move is to get inside that person's skin, to see the world through their eyes.
This isn't just about, social grace or making a good impression. It's presented as a foundational practice for genuine human engagement and ultimately for cultivating robust self-worth. It recognizes that true value and connection are often found in that dynamic space between people, not solely within the confines of the isolated individual. It's a really powerful second pillar in our architectural design.
Okay, so we've got the secure foundation and this transformative power of directing our gaze outward. But how do we actually make those shifts, especially when our internal narrative, or maybe just ingrained habits, might be pulling us the other way? That brings us to a concept that seems to underpin all of this: consciousness. Our July 3rd document includes this very concise but potent quote: "If we are not involved in the process of consciousness, we are unconscious." Now that sounds almost obvious, maybe, like it's stating the clear fact, but it feels like it holds a much deeper meaning for personal growth. What exactly does consciousness mean in this context, and why is it so utterly crucial to building this architecture of self-worth?
This seemingly simple statement points to what can truly be considered a master skill for any kind of personal development, a vital cognitive pillar in our blueprint. In this context, consciousness isn't merely being awake and aware of your surroundings. It refers to a profound metacognitive ability. It's the capacity to observe our own mental processes, to sort of step back and notice our thoughts, our feelings, our impulses, our biases, almost like we're an objective observer watching a movie of our own mind. And then crucially, it's the ability to choose where to direct our attention. Think of it like having an internal dashboard. You can see what's running, and you can actively decide to steer the vehicle. Without this active involvement in our own minds, we are by default unconscious, meaning we're reactive. We're driven by ingrained patterns, by automatic fears and insecurities, often without even realizing it. We're essentially on autopilot, just responding to stimuli rather than consciously choosing our responses.
So it's a difference between being like a passenger in our own minds, just being carried along by whatever emotion or old habit pops up, and actually being the driver, taking control of where we focus our energy, our attention. If we're unconscious, we're just repeating old scripts, often without even knowing it.
Yeah.
But with consciousness, we can actually steer. We can course correct.
Exactly. It's the critical pivot point. It distinguishes intentional growth from just accidental drift. It's a distinction between being driven by unconscious fears and insecurities, which manifest in those masks, those unworthy goals, the self-absorption we discussed, versus consciously choosing to focus on purpose and service. Consciously directing our gaze outward, this meta-awareness is the precise mechanism that allows us to break free from those old, self-sabotaging patterns. It enables us to catch ourselves when our attention starts to drift inward, into anxiety or self-criticism, and then deliberately redirect that attention outward, towards understanding others or towards a meaningful purpose that aligns with our unique design. Without this foundational meta-awareness, any attempt to shift our focus or change our behavior will probably be fleeting, because the underlying unconscious drivers, they remain unaddressed, just pulling us back to familiar, maybe unhealthy territory. It gives us the leverage to actually implement that outward gaze strategy.
And the document reinforces this with another quick but powerful insight. Awareness of errors is essential to improvement. That seems to connect directly to this idea of consciousness, doesn't it? You can't fix what you don't even know is broken, or even that you're doing it in the first place.
Precisely. This companion insight reinforces the absolute necessity of consciousness as the foundation for any genuine growth or improvement. We cannot change what we cannot see. It's that simple. If we are unconscious, our errors, our biases, our self-defeating patterns, our blind spots, they all remain invisible to us. We might experience the negative consequences, sure, but we don't understand the cause, or even that we might be the cause. Consciousness provides that essential observational platform. From there, we can recognize patterns, understand their origins, often stemming from those deep-seated insecurities we started with, and then make deliberate choices about how to respond differently in the future. It's the very first step in any genuine, sustainable transformation. It's what allows us to truly learn from our missteps, rather than just mindlessly repeating them over and over and wondering why things aren't changing. It's the light, really. The light that illuminates the path for growth and enables intentional self-correction, constantly refining the architectural plan.
This idea of consciousness, of choosing where to direct our attention and becoming aware of our patterns, that really sets the stage for the next crucial piece of wisdom in our source material. It talks about age, stating, "How old we are is unimportant. It's one's attitude toward age that matters most." Now, this is profound because it immediately tells us that our external circumstances, like just our chronological age, aren't the defining factor. not in our capabilities or our worth. It's our internal framework, our chosen perspective. But how does this apply beyond just age? What's the broader, more universal principle at play here that contributes to our architecture of self-worth?
This seemingly simple observation about age, it reveals a fundamental principle that applies to virtually every aspect of our lives. Our mental frameworks, they either constrain or liberate us. Age, in this context, is just one vivid example of an external variable that people often allow to define them or limit them. The source explicitly says that by beating down fears of aging, we add youth and years to our life. It encourages us to defeat old age by refusing to let it hold you back, and don't be age conscious. Now, this isn't about denying the biological realities of aging, of course. It's about choosing a perspective that empowers us to keep engaging with life, rather than one that disempowers us by focusing on perceived declines or, societal expectations tied to a number. It's about refusing to let an external label define our internal capacity.
And the farm example that follows really brings this home, doesn't it? It says, on the farm, a boy became a man when he proved he could do the work of a man. That's so illustrative because it has absolutely nothing to do with a birthday or a number. It's all about capability, contribution.
It's an excellent, deeply insightful illustration.
Yeah.
That example just bypasses chronological age entirely. It defines maturity, or manhood in this case, by capability and contribution, by demonstrated competence and responsibility. A boy who's, say, 12 might be considered a man if he shows the skills, the strength, the integrity needed in that demanding context, maybe even leading tasks, supporting his family. Conversely, someone who's 30 might still be seen as a boy if they consistently lack those capabilities, shirk responsibility, fail to contribute. This makes it abundantly clear that perceived limitations, whether it's age, our family background, or perceived intelligence, past failures, whatever, are often self-imposed, or at least perpetuated by our own internal narratives, by the story we tell ourselves. If that boy on the farm only focused on how young he was, or how much he couldn't do because he wasn't old enough, he'd never achieved that status of man in his community. His perspective would have constrained him, locked him into an identity that wasn't serving his growth.
So it's a profound generalization of that principle. When we focus on our inadequacies, we reinforce them. When we focus on our purposes and possibilities, we transcend them. That sounds like a complete reorientation of our internal lens, one that sounds absolutely vital for building on that foundation of self-worth we talked about earlier.
Exactly. This is the perspective principle in action, a crucial component in our cognitive framework for self-worth. If you constantly dwell on what you lack, what you're not good at, what you can't do, what's wrong with you, whether it's your age, your past, your perceived weaknesses, even societal expectations, you inevitably reinforce those limitations in your own mind and often in your reality. It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your internal focus shapes your external experience. But when you consciously shift your focus to your purposes and possibilities, to what you can do, to your inherent design and potential, to the contribution you can make, you effectively transcend them. You don't ignore the challenges, obviously, but you operate from a place of capability and growth rather than constraint.
So much power in where we choose to put our focus.
So much. The core insight here is profoundly empowering. We have more control over our perspective than we typically realize, and our perspective has more power over our reality than we typically acknowledge. This conscious choice of perspective is a direct practical application of that meta-awareness we just discussed. It liberates us from self-imposed limitations. It allows us to see opportunities where others might only see obstacles, and it transforms our potential from like a fixed ceiling into an expanding horizon. It's the framework that allows us to build higher and stronger, despite perceived limitations.
This all sounds incredibly compelling in theory, but how do these principles actually play out in the messy, demanding real world? Our document gives us a fantastic concrete example through some very specific coaching wisdom. It says, learning to love the last group of the day, the group of kids you initially dislike, that's what makes you a great coach. That's a powerful and relatable statement, isn't it? I think many of us have experienced working with people we find challenging. How does that specific observation encapsulate this entire framework, this blueprint for self-worth we've been building piece by piece?
This coaching insight is a truly brilliant miniature case study. A practical demonstration of the entire framework in action. It perfectly illustrates that journey. From insecurity and self-absorption to outward focus and authentic contribution. Consider the progression it implies. It differentiates a mediocre coach from a great coach, not just by skill, but by their internal state and their chosen action. A mediocre coach, well, they're often trapped by their initial preferences and biases. They might be excellent with the talented kids, the enthusiastic ones who naturally click with them. Those interactions are easy, right? Maybe even ego-boosting. But when faced with the group of kids you initially dislike, perhaps they're challenging, less skilled, unmotivated, or just difficult to connect with, the mediocre coach defaults to their internal preferences, their frustrations, their perceived effort-reward ratio. Their coaching effectiveness gets severely limited by their own comfort zone, their personal biases, which are often rooted in a degree of self-absorption or maybe a lack of secure identity that only seeks positive, easy interactions. They're unconsciously driven by their own emotional reactions.
So a great coach isn't just someone with more technical skills or a better winning record, but someone who's actually gone through that deeper internal shift you've been describing. They're not letting their personal feelings or initial judgments dictate their actions. It sounds like they're applying the full architectural blueprint we've been mapping out.
Exactly. A great coach, by contrast, doesn't just tolerate the difficult group. They actively transcend these initial reactions through conscious choice and outward focus, as the source states. They learn to love them. Now, this isn't about faking an emotion. It's about a deliberate reorientation that actually allows the genuine emotion to emerge eventually. And this transformation, it requires every single element we've discussed in our architecture.
Okay, break that down. How does it connect?
Well, first, it requires a secure sense of identity, that foundational layer Dungy spoke about. The great coach isn't dependent on the kids' immediate approval or performance for their own self-worth. They're grounded enough not to take difficult behavior personally, not to feel their own value threatened by a challenging group. They operate from inherent worth, not contingent validation. Second, it demands the ability to direct attention outward Green's principle in action, instead of dwelling on their own negative feelings or frustrations about this difficult group. The coach consciously focuses on understanding those kids, their individual needs, their unique strengths, their potential, no matter how hidden it seems. This is getting into someone's skin applied to coaching. Actively seeking to understand the unlikable child's perspective, their challenges, their inner world.
Makes sense. Keep going.
Third, it necessitates consciousness of one's own patterns and biases. The great coach is aware of their initial dislike. They don't let it remain this unconscious, unexamined driver of their behavior. They see that bias, acknowledge it, and then consciously choose to work against it, applying their meta-awareness to guide their actions. And finally, it requires a perspective focused on service and possibility rather than self-protection or just ease. Their ultimate goal is to develop all the kids in their care, not just the easy ones or the ones who initially flatter their ego. This example is a perfect microcosm of the entire architecture. It shows how grounding oneself in inherent worth, actively directing attention externally, maintaining meta-awareness over biases, and choosing an empowering, service-oriented perspective, all converge into effective transformative action. That love for the last group. It isn't an emotion that just spontaneously appears. It's a byproduct of a deliberate, conscious choice to serve and engage, even when it's hard. And that leads to profound personal and professional growth. This practical application just reinforces every structural element of our blueprint.
That coaching example really makes these abstract principles concrete, shows them in action. Fantastic. Now let's shift to another powerful image from our sources, this one from the philosopher Francis Bacon. He suggests that being gracious and courteous to strangers shows one's heart is no island cut off from other lands, but a continent that joins to them. That's such a vivid metaphor, isn't it? It immediately evokes this sense of vastness versus isolation. What kind of profound transformation does this island versus continent consciousness imply? And how does it relate to our overall architecture of self-worth?
It's a truly beautiful and insightful metaphor, yeah. And it captures the ultimate expansion of identity that this framework enables. It adds a crucial relational pillar to our self-worth architecture. When we operate from a place of insecurity, which, as we discussed, often stems from that foundational lack of self-esteem Dungy described, our hearts become islands. And what does an island do? By its very nature, it's isolated, defensive, and focused on self-protection. An island is inherently disconnected, surrounded by the unknown. Psychologically, this means we view the other lands, other people, other cultures, other perspectives, even challenges, with suspicion, as potential threats to our fragile autonomy or carefully constructed, maybe insecure identity. This is the natural psychological state when our self-worth is precarious. We build emotional walls, we guard ourselves, we keep others at a distance, because any perceived challenge or difference or vulnerability feels like a direct threat. We become insular, primarily concerned with our own survival, our own comfort, our own ego. We retreat into ourselves.
And the continent is the complete opposite of that, right? It's all about connection, a sense of shared humanity, a larger identity beyond just ourselves. It sounds truly liberating.
Exactly. When we begin to operate from a truly secure foundation, from that deep knowledge that we are inherently valued, intentionally designed, purpose-driven, our hearts undergo this profound transformation. They become continents. And a continent, by its nature, is connected, generous, and focused on contribution. It's integrated with other land masses, allowing for the free flow of resources, ideas, people. In a psychological sense, this means our identity expands beyond the narrow confines of our individual self. We start to see ourselves as intrinsically linked to others as part of a larger human whole. We're not just an individual operating alone, but a participant in this grander interconnected existence.
So the graciousness Bacon mentions isn't just good manners.
Not at all. Our generosity and courtesy towards strangers, as Bacon notes, they aren't merely polite behaviors or forced acts of kindness. They are outward expressions of deep inward shift in consciousness. They signal that we're no longer primarily concerned with protecting a vulnerable, isolated ego. Instead, we're free. Free to engage, to understand, to contribute, and to empathize with the world around us. This shift from island consciousness to continent consciousness represents, well, perhaps the most significant transformation a person can undergo. Moving from a state of fear, scarcity, and isolation to one of connection, abundance, and genuine belonging. It's about moving from a mindset of me versus the world to we are all in this together, recognizing our shared humanity and our place in a larger tapestry. This expansive relational perspective adds incredible strength and resilience to our overall self-worth architecture.
That shift from an island to a continent really speaks to a broader sense of connection, of recognizing our place. And speaking of foundations and where we come from, our document also has this very poignant piece of wisdom about gratitude and origins. Never complain about the things your parents could not give you. It was probably all they had. Now, this isn't about excusing past wrongs or denying difficult experiences, obviously, but it clearly speaks to a powerful shift in perspective, doesn't it? What's the deep psychological impact of truly embracing this kind of gratitude, especially when we're talking about building authentic self-worth?
This insight serves as such a powerful reminder that gratitude is a fundamental prerequisite for psychological health. And it forms another crucial support in our architecture of self-worth. Like you said, it's not about condoning any parental shortcomings, nor is it about denying the very real difficulties or even traumas one might have experienced growing up. Instead, it addresses a profound and often insidious pitfall in identity formation, building our identity on a foundation of deficit.
A foundation of deficit. Explain that more.
When we perpetually focus on what we lacked, what our parents didn't provide, what opportunities we missed out on, what unfairness we experienced, we end up cultivating a perpetual sense of being owed something by life. This mindset is incredibly damaging. It creates this constant feeling of entitlement, a sort of mental ledger of grievances, which inevitably leads to deep disappointment, chronic resentment, and a pervasive sense of victimhood. It keeps us stuck in the past, forever feeling deprived, no matter what our present circumstances are. We might achieve great things, but still feel this underlying emptiness, always chasing what we believe was withheld from us. This deficit identity undermines any genuine sense of self-worth. It makes us perpetually needy and unsatisfied. It prevents us from fully appreciating or even seeing the positive aspects of our lives, keeping us locked in that island mentality of self-pity and isolation.
So it's about shifting from focusing on what was withheld to recognizing and appreciating what was given, however imperfect or limited it might have been. That sounds like an incredibly powerful way to build resilience and foster some internal abundance.
Precisely. The alternative is to build our identity on a foundation of gratitude. This means consciously acknowledging that whatever the limitations or imperfections, our parents or caregivers gave probably all they had. Their best effort, given their own experiences, their own resources, their own understanding at the time. This perspective doesn't gloss over the past, but it fosters resilience and appreciation for the very life we received. It allows us to recognize the effort, maybe the sacrifice, even the love that was present, however imperfectly it was expressed. It shifts our focus from some imagined ideal or perpetual grievance to the reality of what was offered, allowing us to find peace with our origins.
That sounds like a huge internal shift.
It's psychologically profound. It doesn't mean ignoring trauma or challenges, but rather choosing not to define our entire identity by them. Instead, it allows us to operate from a place of internal abundance, appreciating the life we do have, the capacities we do possess, the journey we are on. This gratitude frees up immense mental and emotional energy that would otherwise just be consumed by complaint, bitterness, self-pity. And that freed energy, it can then be directed outward towards purpose, towards connection, towards contribution, which, as we've seen, is precisely where authentic self-worth truly flourishes. It's an essential part of becoming that continent in your heart, as it liberates us from the self-absorbed grievances that otherwise keep us trapped on an island of resentment. It's a vital element in securing the stability of our self-worth architecture.
That's a profound shift, yeah. Moving from deficit to gratitude. And speaking of perspective, let's talk about something many of us relentlessly chase: happiness. Our source material brings in Robert Sapolsky, who makes this crucial distinction, saying, it's not the pursuit of happiness, it's the happiness of pursuit. This really challenges our conventional understanding, doesn't it? Which often frames happiness as a destination, like a goal to be achieved. What's the critical difference here, and why does it matter so much for our overall well-being and ultimately for building authentic self-worth?
This insight from Robert Sapolsky is absolutely central to understanding sustainable fulfillment, and it forms another critical element in our architectural blueprint. It addresses a very common and often frustrating misconception about happiness that society, advertising, even a lot of pop culture just constantly reinforce. When we approach the pursuit of happiness as an end goal, meaning we believe happiness is something we acquire, like an object, a promotion, a relationship, some specific life circumstance, it invariably creates a frustrating cycle where happiness remains always just out of reach.
The hedonic treadmill, right?
Exactly, the hedonic treadmill. You set a goal, you work tirelessly, you achieve it, and you feel this brief surge of elation, maybe for a few hours, a few days. But then, almost inevitably, that feeling dissipates. And you're left looking for the next thing, the next achievement, the next external validation to make you happy again. This makes happiness this fleeting external commodity that we constantly have to chase. It leads to perpetual dissatisfaction and underlying anxiety that it could disappear at any moment. This relentless chase ties back directly to that inward focus we discussed, constantly trying to manipulate our internal state by achieving external outcomes, which are, by their very nature, transient.
So it's a fundamental shift in where we find our joy, isn't it? Instead of focusing solely on the outcome, the reward, we're reorienting ourselves to find joy in the how, the process, the journey towards it. We're embracing the path itself rather than just waiting for the destination.
Precisely. The happiness of pursuit fundamentally reorients our relationship with satisfaction and fulfillment. It means finding joy in the process of working toward meaningful goals. This is a crucial distinction. The happiness isn't contingent on the achievement of the goal in the distant future. It's rooted in the engagement in the journey itself, right here, right now. The effort you put in, the learning you acquire, the challenges you overcome, the small wins along the way, the connections you make with others in the process. These are all profound sources of satisfaction. This approach creates sustainable satisfaction because the joy is embedded in the ongoing activity, not just in some transient outcome that you quickly adapt to anyway.
That makes so much more sense for long-term well-being.
Absolutely, and it ties directly back to our earlier insights about outward focus and purpose. When we are engaged in something meaningful outside of ourselves, whether it's understanding others, contributing to a team, mastering a skill, working towards a larger vision that aligns with our unique design, the happiness emerges naturally from the engagement, not from the achievement. It becomes this delightful byproduct of living a purpose-driven life rather than a goal you desperately chase. This approach shifts our internal state from one of anxious seeking and external dependency to one of engaged doing, of being present and contributing, which is far more conducive to authentic confidence, deep fulfillment, and a robust, resilient sense of self-worth. It adds this dynamic, ongoing energy source to our self-worth architecture. #tag integration and synthesis.
Wow. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, pulling these profound insights from what seems like very different sources. From Tony Dungy's spiritual wisdom to Robert Greene's observations on human behavior, those practical coaching lessons, the philosophical views of Bacon and Sapolsky. It truly is a rich tapestry. So as we draw this deep dive towards a close, what does this all mean when we bring it together? How do all these threads, these seemingly disparate pieces, weave into a cohesive, actionable architecture for authentic living?
When we bring these diverse and powerful insights together, they indeed form a remarkably comprehensive and robust framework, an architecture of authentic self-worth that operates on multiple interconnected levels. Think of it like constructing a strong, resilient, and beautiful structure for your inner life, one that stands firm against the winds of insecurity and external pressures.
Okay, lay out those levels for us.
Sure. At the foundational level, the absolute bedrock of this architecture, we establish a secure identity. This comes through that profound understanding of our created purpose and unique design, that truth Tony Dungy laid out, that we are intentional, irreplaceable, known before we even took our first breath. This understanding provides the deep psychological safety that liberates us from that constant, exhausting need to prove ourselves or wear masks to gain acceptance. It's the unshakable ground, like a skyscraper's deep footings.
Got it. Foundation first. What's next?
Moving to the behavioral level, the visible actions we take, we then actively practice directing our attention outward rather than inward. This is where Robert Greene's insights are so crucial. It means consciously focusing on understanding others and fulfilling our purpose, instead of being preoccupied with managing our own insecurities, our internal narratives, or how we're perceived. This outward gaze naturally fosters empathy, builds genuine connection, and cultivates a powerful sense of contribution. Think of it like the welcoming facade and open doors of our building.
Okay, foundation behavior, then cognition.
Exactly. On the cognitive level, the way we think and process information, we develop consciousness of our own patterns and choose our perspectives deliberately. This is that meta-awareness. We discuss the ability to observe our own thoughts, feelings, biases, like that initial dislike a coach might feel. Instead of being unconsciously driven by fears and limitations, we consciously choose to focus on possibilities, capability, purpose. This conscious choice empowers us to transcend limitations like age, background, past experiences. It forms the strong, adaptive internal framework of our building.
And relationally, the connection piece.
Right. At the relational level, how we connect with the world, we expand from island consciousness to continent consciousness. This is Bacon's beautiful metaphor come to life. We move beyond isolation and defensiveness, seeing ourselves connected to and responsible for others rather than separate and self-protective. This shift promotes generosity, courtesy, a brighter sense of belonging, transforming our interactions into a vibrant, interconnected community, like a sprawling complex, not just a single dwelling.
Love that. And finally, the temporal level, how we see time.
Yes, finally, at the temporal level, how we relate to time in our life's journey, we learn to transcend those limitations of age, background, and circumstances. We do this by focusing on capability and contribution, like the boy on the farm proving his manhood through actions, rather than letting ourselves be constrained by perceived limits or dwelling on complaints about what we lacked. This allows us to live fully in the present, build meaningfully towards the future, and appreciate the journey regardless of our past. It adds dynamic strength and adaptability to the entire structure.
It's truly incredible how all these seemingly disparate pieces fit together so elegantly, forming such a clear, actionable roadmap for building a life rooted in authentic self-worth. It's not just a collection of nice ideas, it really is a comprehensive strategy. #outro. And this isn't just theoretical knowledge we've discussed today, it's truly a lived philosophy. This architecture of authentic living, it transforms how we approach everything, our relationships, how we face challenges, how we seize opportunities, and ultimately our deepest sense of purpose in the world. It's a complete paradigm shift, isn't it? Moving from that deficit mindset, from constantly feeling not enough to one of inherent value, recognizing your worth is already within you.
And that's perhaps the most profound realization of all, the ultimate insight revealed by this unique July 3rd document. Our worth isn't something we have to earn or constantly prove. It's something we must simply recognize, accept, and then express through our lives. When we align our lives with this understanding that we are fundamentally designed for connection, contribution, and consciousness, we free ourselves to live with a kind of authentic confidence and generous spirit, which not only fulfills us personally, but also naturally draws others, fostering deeper connections and creates a powerful, positive impact in the world.
That's a powerful closing thought.
The journey from insecurity to authentic self-worth isn't really about becoming someone different or fundamentally changing who you are at your core. It's about becoming more fully who you were designed to be all along. And perhaps that's the most profound insight of all, that the search for identity ends not with the discovery of something entirely new, but with the recognition of something that was always true within you, simply waiting to be fully embodied. So we encourage you, listening right now, to reflect on this truth in your own life. How might shifting your perspective, grounding your identity in something larger, and consistently directing your attention outward, how might that change how you experience your days and your deepest purpose?